Hello, Deplorable Fred coming to you from Deplorable Freeport, New York, in the deplorable United States of America. Isn't it sad that these days anything that's good and decent and upright and morally correct is now considered to be deplorable? You want to support a man who's promised to fix a broken system, a man who has no real reason to run for president because he really doesn't need the money. He's doing it because he has a fire in his belly. He thinks he has something to offer us, and you're deplorable for that reason. I'm going to tell you a couple of things that I find to be deplorable. Some of the things that really bug me about Hillary and the Democrats and their whole rotten system. I find it deplorable that Hillary could be so dismissive to 13.5 million voters who voted for Donald Trump. They love to tell you that the Republican Party is a bastion of white privilege and white racism, and that Trump is their favored candidate, when the truth of the matter is the GOP didn't want Trump to win. It's we the people who voted for him, and we overrode the will of the party bosses. They didn't like it. We dragged them along, kicking and screaming every step of the way, but this is the doing of the people. I also find it reprehensible that the DNC rigged their primaries. They wanted their candidate to win. They wanted it to be Hillary. They made it so that she couldn't lose. They rigged the system. They reduced Bernie Sanders to being nothing more than a mascot, somebody who tagged along just for visual purposes to make it look like they were doing something that almost resembles a democratic process, but they rigged it so he couldn't win. I find it really odd throughout the whole Democratic primaries that every time Hillary won a state, she got a massive amount of delegates. And every time Bernie won a state, he just got a handful of delegates. And she got all the super delegates and he got almost none. They rigged that system right from the get-go, and they didn't allow a fair process. That's deplorable. I find it deplorable that Hillary has only one style of campaigning, and that is divisiveness. She loves to go out there and tell the news media and all the people watching that Republicans are all about division and all about divisiveness, and they just want to divide us all up and get us all angry at each other. Who's doing that for real? The Democrats are. This is their tactic. This kind of divisiveness is the fuel that fires their engine. It's what makes them go forward. They use it every single election. They remind everybody about all of their differences, and they stir up all of this hatred between black and white, rich and poor, every single possible angle they can come up with to get people fighting and arguing and disliking each other. And then they blame it on the Republicans. They're the ones who bring up these talking points, and then they always shift the blame to the Republicans. I think that's deplorable. I think it's deplorable that the only talking points that she has is racism and Islamophobia and homophobia and any other kind of ism and phobia that you could possibly think of. And she's going to label all of us with that, or maybe just half of us. She only thinks half of us are that bad. But really, what you saw that day is another rare glimpse into the real Hillary Clinton. She also allowed that to come out in the first Democratic debate. If any of you remember, one of the first questions that they were asked was, who do you consider your enemies to be? And Hillary Clinton very casually said the Republicans. And when she was admonished for that, she kind of walked it back and said, I was just joking. I didn't mean that. But really, that's a real glimpse into the true persona of Hillary Clinton. If you're not with her, you're against her. And if you're against her, you're her enemy. And she treats her enemies very harshly. The Clintons have a long reputation, going back decades, of having harsh tactics used against anybody they think is against them. Stating that Republicans are my enemies was not a slip up. Well, yeah, it was a Freudian slip up. She let her true self out. Just like when she said that half of Trump's supporters are deplorable. She didn't really mean that, right? No, she did mean it. She hates you if you don't vote for her. And I got news for you. If she gets elected, she ain't going to be your president. She's not going to care about you. She's not going to care about any of the points that you supported Donald Trump for. In fact, you're going to become a second-class citizen if she becomes president. Your opinions won't count anymore because you're deplorable. You're a racist, homophobic, misogynist, whatever. That is deplorable. I find it deplorable that President Obama is going to veto legislation that allows victims of 9/11 to sue Saudi Arabia. Once again, we have a president that protects Islam at the expense of his own people. People that he swore an oath to protect when he took the oath of the presidency, to defend us against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I find it deplorable that Hillary Clinton will talk to us and lecture us about homophobia and Islamophobia when she and the Clinton Foundation have taken tens of millions of dollars in contributions from countries that practice Sharia law. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, and whatever other countries in that part of the world that are oil rich, that are repressive, that treat women as property, that countries that have laws that will throw you off the roof of a building if you're suspected of being a homosexual, countries that will beat a woman in public if she is seen talking to another person, countries that have laws that do not allow women to leave the house without a veil, or to drive a car, or to walk the streets without a male escort from her own family. Hillary Clinton knows this to be true. She won't talk about it publicly or admonish the Saudis publicly because she gets so much money from them. How dare she lecture us about morality and right and wrong and any kind of phobia or ism when she takes money from the dirtiest people on the planet. It's the dirtiest money from the dirtiest people in the world. That's deplorable. And I tell you what, if Trump don't win, that's going to be deplorable too. He's starting to edge ahead in the polls, and this is a true indication that people are beginning to see Hillary as being unfit. She doesn't have the temperament for this. She doesn't have the experience for it. She can't run on her past experience because her past experience is all littered with failures. She's responsible for Libya going down in flames, for Syria being torn apart by a civil war, and all of the hard-fought gains in Iraq being lost. All happened on Hillary's watch. What is she going to go out and talk about? Her great successes as Secretary of State? She was a total failure. And she has nothing to run on, and she has nothing to brag about. So all she could do is to tear down her opponent with accusations of white supremacy, white privilege, homophobia, Islamophobia, racism, and everything else, which is the last desperate stone thrown by a person that has no legitimate argument. Hillary is unfit. She cannot be our president. There is just no way possible that we can let this happen. Support Trump. Let's get these polls turned around. Let's make sure that Trump wins his home state of New York. If you're a New Yorker, you've got to vote on Election Day. Usually New York sways Democrat every single time on the strength of 4 boroughs. There's 5 boroughs in the city of New York, and 4 of them are jam-packed with Democrats. If Long Island, upstate New York, and the borough of Staten Island have a really high voter turnout, and we come out in force, we could flip New York into the red category this election cycle. And I'd like to see that happen. Vote Trump.